we're just going to give her. I think everyone knows the process now, and so I just want to welcome everyone. It is incredible to see such a full room to talk about leadership and collaboration in these times. So we have a great panel. There's 3 of us. So my name is Jamie Jones, and I am a faculty researcher at Selkirk College, and that is located in rural British Columbia. And so I'm going to talk about a really exciting project that we did that focused on cultivating collaboration to address homelessness as a region. And I put rural in brackets in the slide title because our experience is rural, but a lot of our lessons are really applicable across various contexts. So, what are we going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the need in our rural context and how and why we needed to address homelessness as a region. I am going to briefly discuss our project, and then I'm going to dive into the key learnings that I wanted to share with you today. So, what was our need? So, our need in our region was really helped inform why we needed to do collaboration. In the slide here, you can see these are the 3 communities in a region. We're quite rural. We're located in the southeastern corner of British Columbia. So we have 3 main rural municipalities. We have the city of Trail, we have the city of Castlegar, and the city of Nelson. And these communities collectively have a population of about 30,000 people. And it is a 30-minute drive between each of the communities. So we have some geographic distance. And the services in each of the communities are different. Nelson is a Reaching Home designated community. They've been supporting unhoused individuals for quite a long time. But in Castlegar and Trail, homelessness has always existed to some extent, but it was hidden. But since the pandemic, it is becoming more and more visible, and it has definitely been impacting those communities in a more upfront way. This slide really speaks to what that looks like. So in 2024, so last year, Hey!
Don't get fresh.
We'll turn the lights back on. Okay, there we go. Some mood lighting. Woohoo!
Spooky Halloween.
Exactly. Halloween's getting close. Great. So we did a community perceptions and homelessness survey. We had heard that the community wanted to share their perspectives around homelessness. And so what's really interesting is we expected 100 people to fill out the survey. We had a response rate of 800 community members across these 3 communities to respond. So here you can see in the top slide that, or the top graph, the 2/3 of folks that responded noticed a substantial increase in the unhoused population in their community. And the bottom graph shows that approximately 9 in 10 individuals indicated that homelessness was having an impact to some degree. So that's looking at the scales 5 to 7. And 57% noticed or is having a big impact in their community. So this is partly the need. And we had the systemic cracks around rural homelessness, and this probably exists for many of the communities that you come from as well. But the structural challenges for us were the long distances, the minimal transportation, people moving between communities in order to access services. There was a lack of available data to really understand what's working, what's not working, and knowing where to act. The systemic barriers, we had duplication of effort. So all the different communities were duplicating efforts, the different service organizations. There was competition for resources between the organizations and communities. There was siloed systems. There was a lack of capacity to coordinate across these different silos. And then the human impact. There's burnout in the sector. Those are our community leaders, our frontline responders, and of course the folks with lived experience. And then, of course, the overlapping crises that are affecting all of us, the inflation, the toxic drug supply, the housing shortages, and extreme weather. We've had lots of summers with very smoky conditions. So all these cracks were interconnected, and no one organization could really help support this. So that's where myself, through the community college, listening to what the needs were, worked with community partners and came up with this project for a regional approach to homelessness. So what was our project? How did we approach this as a region? So I'll go through this relatively quickly so that I can get to the lessons learned, but these slides are available as a resource if you wanted to explore them a little bit more. So our project was called Bridging Rural Homelessness and Wellbeing, a Sustainable and Collaborative Response. So this was funded in large part thanks to the Social Science and Humanities Council of Canada. It was an applied research project. We also had funding from MyTech's Accelerate and our local municipalities to help us fund internships, student internships to work on the project. And then we had also other resources that came in over time from different organizations and especially the in-kind time from all our partners. And so I'm so grateful for the partners who actively participated. Our direction of travel was to improve the well-being of those experiencing homelessness in our region. We didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but that's the direction we were going. And we understood very early on that addressing homelessness is very complex. We heard that lots today with, Minister Robertson talking about complexity too. All those intended and unintended consequences all across the system. And so what that was for us was an invitation to ensure that we had diversity at the table participating, and it was an invitation for us to experiment. We had different objectives that drove our project, and I'll quickly summarize those in a moment. But we also decided early on to focus on the chronically unhoused, the visible population, just to help us focus our efforts. So our first objective is to conduct research. So we did it in a couple different ways. We did interviews with service providers, service users to learn what's working, what's not working, and get some ideas from those on the ground that will actually help in our rural context. We did that community perceptions survey. We also had students come on board and do lots of smaller scale projects to fill capacity gaps that we identified throughout the project from all our community partners. We built capacity. Again, we have a pool of students that could help support needs in the region. So I was constantly listening to where there was gaps and how we could fill them through student resources, whether applied projects or internships. And we also, one key example of what we did is there was a gap identified of outreach in the summer months. So we had internships where students were going out and working alongside community partners to improve the level of support and outreach over the summer months when it was really needed. And we also built capacity with different folks that needed it. So we're bringing information to the table, sharing knowledge, and building capacity with our folks with lived experience as well. Our third objective was around building relationships, and this to me turned out to be probably the most impactful part of our project. We were bringing all the different stakeholders from across the communities and across the organizations together through virtual meetings throughout the year. And then we held an in-person summit once a year to bring all the different stakeholders together. And we used participatory techniques throughout all of this. And this was really, really foundational to ensure that people were connecting to each other. I also started participating in all the community meetings as much as I could, and then cross-pollinating ideas and say, hey, did you know that Nelson's doing this? Did you know that Trail's doing that? And hey, I just learned this thing from my colleagues at Okanagan College, and they're doing this. Can we try this here? And the value of that cross-pollination was huge. So what were the seeds planted during our project? And you'll notice a bit of a theme as you go through the slides. I'm just going to pause for a second. As we were going through our project, this metaphor developed that we were tending a garden together. Addressing homelessness was like a garden. It's complex. There's, soil conditions and sunlight and bugs and all these different things. And we saw ourselves as gardeners tending the garden, and that really helped us collectively look at how we're addressing homelessness, and so you'll see that kind of throughout the presentation. So the seeds we planted, we had 30 partner organizations, 70 contacts. We held 3 summits. And again, this is a rural area. We had over 500 people participate over those 3 years. We had 26 actions developed. We had the summers with outreach. We had over 60 students engaged, and over 90 people with lived experience participating in our various events and activities throughout this work. Now, the key part. What was our learning? So I do invite you to think about how our learning can be applied to your local context. So when I was thinking about how I could wrap up all the stuff that we did, I came up with these 3 pillars for cultivating collaboration in our context. So participation, connection, and experimentation. So I'm going to dive into those some more right now. Participation. So we welcomed participation from a wide variety of voices. This was essential because we knew that there was no expert. I was definitely not the expert. And so I saw everyone in our community, all the voices, all the perspectives, as the experts. And my role was helping to bring folks together to surface that, to help us understand what we needed to do in our specific context. So these were the voices that were part of our project. You can see them here. So we had people with lived and living experience. We had service providers. We had local decision makers, both from the local government leadership level and elected officials. We had students and faculty from our college. We had interested community members. We had representatives from the business community and some really great input that they had, faith communities, other academic institutions, government agencies, the health authority. We just kept the door open. And as you can see here, we really started to create this relational ecology. And the power of those connections between all these different things were so powerful in our experience. So to build our movement as a region, we really had to bridge these silos. We had to bridge between the 3 communities. We had to bridge between the organizations. We had to bridge between all the various perspectives. And we always kept the door open for anyone who wanted to join at any time. And that included folks that might have come with a perspective that maybe was challenging for us to hear. We still welcomed that. And we focused on ensuring that we had broad participation attending, but we also would notice who was missing. If someone was missing, we noticed it. And we tried to seek them out and ask for folks, hey, can you come to this event? It's really important that your voice is here. But we also followed energy. There was folks that would have been great to have at our table and maybe signed on initially to be part of it. And at the end of the day, they didn't have the capacity to be there and participate. It was okay. We made the choice. The invitation's always there. They always got the emails. They always got the invitation. But it was okay to just let them go. Let's focus where there is energy and go with that. And we did do some nudging. There was times when it was like, nope, this specific person really needs to be there. I was a little bit of a pain sending email and email and email until I got them there, but it worked. So you have to pay attention to those different kind of levels of participation you need there. We centered lived experience from the very beginning of this project. We had lived experience co-researchers. These were folks that are very well connected to the communities, and they helped guide us. They helped tell me, hey, Jamie, that's a bad idea, or hey, Jamie, have you thought about this? They also helped us get folks to events that maybe lived rough that night. So we had a spectrum of perspectives at our table. As the project developed, we built a lived experience circle on homelessness that helped us, build capacity in advocating for peers, addressing stigma. We're still working with that team now, but it really was a start to help shift narratives. And our lived experience participation, it emerged and changed over time. It started off, just attending meetings, and by the end, our lived experience leaders were helping us organize our annual events. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that pretty quick. So connection was our second pillar I wanted to focus on. We really needed to build connections so that we could collaborate, and I experimented lots and learned a lot along the way. So participatory processes were essential every time that we brought folks together on this project. So we would create the space so that diverse voices could connect and collaborate, and this connection was key to that. So I wanted to find ways that we could get folks to engage across difference, whether in person or online. We experimented with different formats. Here you can see a couple screenshots from some of our virtual meetings where we did breakout groups with engaging check-ins. We had shared documents. And it was great because you would have folks with lived experience participating in a breakout group with an elected official. And it really, the way that we developed it out, it really broke down any power differential to encourage voices to be heard. And this was when we asked for feedback after every event. These participatory engaging processes were the things that mattered the most to the folks that were participating. I had to trust the process a lot. I was definitely experimenting myself with different ways of doing this, but it was worthwhile. We, as part of addressing the power differentials and just creating conditions was really important. So we started off every single event with a set of invitations. And these emerged over time. The ones that you see up on the screen here are the ones that is our latest version of it. I'm sure it'll always continue to iterate. But again, keeping with that gardening theme that was emerging for our whole team is, it's the essential conditions for growing together. Come as you are, welcome our diversity, listen to past experiences, but focus on future possibilities. And I really leaned heavy into the curiosity piece. I want you to repeat after me. I never thought of it that way. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, I'm gonna count to 3 and I wanna hear, I never thought of it that way. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Woohoo. So I learned this technique from, not technique, but I was inspired by Monica Guzman's book. I never thought of it that way, as a way to encourage folks to have less judgment and have more curiosity. And so I got everyone to say exactly what you just said at our in-person events. That little thing made a big difference. I actually heard people saying, I never thought of it that way. And those little shifts were huge. And you're probably looking at the last one going, what is Geffen said? I'm going to get to that. So shared leadership was really important in our collaboration efforts. So we needed to find a way to ensure that people saw themselves reflected in the work so that they're more engaged, they're more invested, and they're more likely to contribute meaningfully. So we did this in many different ways. I'm just going to focus on 2 specific examples from our 2025 West Kootenay Homelessness Response Summit. So first, we decided to do something unique and different. We called it the Inspiration Ideas Showdown. Instead of having a keynote speaker, we invited this huge long list of, hey, folks, what do you think we should do in the region? Do you want to pitch an innovative idea at our event? Kind of like CBC's Canada Reads, if you're familiar with that. And so we ended up with a number of folks that went up and they pitched an idea. And they argued why it'd be good to try or expand in our region. And it was this really fun, playful, competitive, and deeply engaging process that allowed us to share ideas, but it came from the leadership of people in our region. The second example is our lived experience pods. So at each of our 3 annual summits, we made sure that lived experience voices were shared in a good way. And at our 3rd summit, our lived experience Circle and Homelessness folks took the leadership and said, we want to do these pods. And so what they did is we had different pods all around the room with one lived experienced Circle and Homelessness leading the conversation, but welcoming in any other folks with lived experience to join as they felt comfortable. And they answered these questions. What? What does homelessness look like to you? So what? Why does it matter? And what ideas do we have? I can tell you the energy in that room when participants self-selected to go and to hear a pod was incredible. And again, the feedback that we got from some of my participants was like, this changed people. And it gave the leadership to the folks with lived experience. It was their part to it. And I have to say, as someone who was holding space for all this stuff to happen, it was hard. It was hard for me. It was messy. I had to let go. I trusted the process. It didn't quite go as we had planned on paper, but it happened exactly the way it was supposed to, and it was perfect, even if it went different as planned. So messiness and trusting the process is a key learning for me to share from that. We also encourage creativity and playfulness. Our in-person events, we designed them to be playful, creative. We had pipe cleaners, and we had paper and candy and fidgets and felts and all sorts of ways for folks to be creative. And this really, again, addressed power differential. It helped folks get creative. There was like collaborative pipe cleaner creations happening, and it encourages folks to use a different element of their heart and their brain and their soul when you can arrive and all of a sudden you have this invitation to be playful. It sets a different tone, and it created a space for innovation. So I've talked about how participation and connection are important foundations for collaboration. The last pillar is experimentation. So it's learning through action. So it's learning becomes action, action becomes learning. How is this related? So again, I'm here talking to you because I'm an applied researcher. Well, when I talk to my community partners and I say, it's a research project, they're like, oh, we don't want any more research. We're researched to death. We don't want another report that's going to sit on the shelf. And as a researcher, I had to, sit with that and reflect on it. And then I quickly realized, we're working in complexity. We have to learn. We have to know what's working and what's not working. We have to feed it back into the system right away so that we can learn, try something, and then do it again. And so we learned these small iterative cycles of learning and reflection were so important to help us move forward. So it was reframing that research is action when it comes to addressing complex topics. Geffen set. What the heck? Geffen set means good enough for now, safe enough to try. Now, I heard the saying, good enough for now, safe enough to try, somewhere along the way. I coined the term Geffen set, and it became this concept this principle that guided our project. I do it with students and with all our partners, and it was an invitation for us to let go of perfection, to embrace experimentation. Geffen set allowed us to shift our thinking to be like, oh, it's okay for us to take small, manageable steps to learn from each one, even if they didn't work, and to adapt. And it made it feel less overwhelming. We started the project thinking, we'll do a big project that's gonna end homelessness. Well, it's not gonna happen. But if we can have the mindset of Geffen set, and take those small iterative steps, we're more likely to go in the direction we want to go together. It gave us that permission to let go and just try. So at each annual summit, again, folks wanted action. Okay, how can we support getting towards action? And how can we ensure that momentum is carried forward after these in-person events? And so we dedicated the last half day of each of our summits to do these collaborative action planning processes. And I discovered there wasn't a ready-made facilitation model that did exactly what I was hoping to do. And so I had to experiment. And the list that you see here are the elements that we really needed to do together in order to help that collaboration turn into actions post-event. It had to be participant-driven, lightly structured. It had to support emergence. It had to be doable. It had to be grounded in shared leadership from everyone in the space and some form of follow-up. So over the 3 years, we learned from what didn't work in 1 year, and we got better and better. And by year 3, we ended up with a process that actually worked. And so I'll share that with you. Who's familiar with the facilitation process open space? Okay, a few people. So there's a process called open space. It's great, but it didn't quite do exactly what I wanted it to do, so I adapted it. And so I called that the cultivating action open space. And so in open space, it's entirely led by the participants in a group. And the group sets the agenda, they choose the topics they want to participate in, and they engage in whatever conversations feel most important to them. So the core principles of open space are whoever comes are the right people, whatever happens is the only thing that could have. Whenever it starts, and when it's over, it's over. So really, it's just a really flexible, a welcoming environment. And participants at the event, they could host a conversation, they could participate in someone else's conversation, and they could just move around the space. They could be a bee cross-pollinating ideas from one topic to another. They could be having a conversation at the water cooler talking about something completely different. It didn't matter. It's that flexibility. But then what we did that made it to go towards action is we ensured that we had different processes in place. So it started with planting seeds. So we had short conversations on any topic folks wanted to, and planting the seeds of ideas, knowing that we were going to next move into another open space conversation where we called it tending the garden. So this is where we could dive deeper and work towards moving that idea to action. And then once the ideas and actions were developed, we would harvest those actions, hearing what came up from the group and finding a way to commit to next steps and share. I also encouraged folks to break the rules as much as they wanted to. It was their time. And that was a really freeing invitation to folks. So in the open space, when we were trying to get the tending the garden from ideas to action, we helped support them. We created a worksheet, which we called the Smart Action Worksheet. This is available as a handout for the session, so you can look deeper. But what it did is it just helped participants think through the different elements of what can get their idea into action that's really doable. And it also helped them outline what the next steps could be if they needed seed money, how people with lived experience could be involved. So asking a bunch of questions to just try to get the elements you needed out of a conversation in order to get towards action. So what did this look like? So in our at our 2025 summit, these photos show kind of the full arc of the process. So the top images show the graphic visual facilitation tools that we used. So in each of those rectangles, there was a topic and a host. So anyone could go up and write what they wanted to do. Then before we broke out into groups, they quickly, shared into a mic, said, hey, I want to talk about this. You didn't need to be an expert in the topic. You just needed to say, I want to talk about this topic. And then the post-it notes are just the table numbers of where those conversations were happening. So folks could decide and self-organize where to go. So that was really great. And it helped people have these conversations, work towards action. But this is where the magic happened. We were really fortunate to have $5,000 in seed money that we could put towards turning these actions into reality. And so after all the actions were shared in the harvest part of the process, everyone had 3 dots in their registration, and they would go and they would use those dots to vote on the actions they thought were most exciting to them. And then our lived experience leaders had the final say. They looked at all the actions, they saw the balance of the votes from the dotocracy that we had done, and then they got to go away, deliberate together, come back and decide where that $5,000 was spent, completely on their own. And then the folks that got that $5,000, they had to commit to doing the work, using the money effectively by the end of the year, and then send a short little simple summary to all of the summit participants so that there was that process to continue and follow through so that actions can go. And I'm proud to say all the actions that got money have made significant progress since this happened late spring. And this really minimized power imbalance. And it really minimized power imbalances. So I'm going to quickly try to go faster because I want to make sure everyone has time here. But just a summary of the key learning is we need to welcome diverse voices. We need to design for connection. And we need to learn through action in all the ways that I briefly talked about. And this project had an impact. And these are just a few reflections to capture this. These are things I heard along the way, not direct, not from formal interviews, but it was hopeful, it was transformative, it was collaborative. I had one person who was very apprehensive against our unhoused residents come up to me after one of the summit goes, "That was so powerful. It's shifted me." Just from hearing from folks with lived experience. And I'm really proud to say, too, that in BC at our 2025 Union of BC Municipalities conference, there was a resolution that was passed to support a regional approach to homelessness. And that was made possible in part due to the 3 communities that came up at one of our summits, and then they advocated at all the different levels, and it made it to the highest level of local government and was endorsed. There was other partners to play in that, but it had to do in part, which is really exciting. So what's next? Well, our regional collaboration has showed that it's effective to work across communities, especially in a rural region. Our momentum's just taking off, and we're trying to figure out what the next move is. We don't have funding for me to continue this regional collaboration right now, but we have this really exciting ideas that we want to do. One of them is called Stories to Solutions, and it's about using this methodology of participatory narrative inquiry to gather stories and then to do collaborative sense-making with all the partners, again, in the region to find where there's energy and resources to act, to continue this work. So super excited to see if we can get that funded to do that. And I wanted to end with this slide. This is artwork by Mike. He is one of our Lived Experience Circle members. And he created this on his own based on conversations that we had leading up to our 2025 Homelessness Response Summit. And I love this image. Earlier we started the presentation in the cracks, the systemic cracks of homelessness, and this shows what's possible. The dandelion and the seeds turning into the butterfly. It's the resilience and the renewal that's possible to spark how small changes can have a big lasting impact. So I just want to thank all my community partners and folks with lived experience that it's really all the people involved in this project that made it as successful as it is. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Hi. I think doing a session without a moderator is the greatest thing in the world because the worst thing about sessions is hearing your own bio being read. So my name is Chris Gorman. I live in New Brunswick. I work at OrgCode, and I love my job. There's my bio. And I apologize because my presentation is different than your presentation. And it's so... Diversity. Well, you'll be the judge of this. So what I want to talk about is I'm a little mad. I'm a lot mad, actually. I'm mad. Who here works in a shelter? I'm mad that people that work in shelters now have to feel like they're made to feel like they're part of the problem and not part of the solution. That is stupid to me. Yeah. So What I'm going to talk about today is not a magic fix. The people who are doing it know it's not a magic fix, but it may be a better way forward than doing what we continue to do as far as community engagement. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why traditional community engagement falls short, how a community liaison committee or a CLC may be a different and better approach for various service providers, especially site-based service providers, but I'll use shelter as the clear example today. And then I'll pull the curtain back a little bit on how does a CLC actually work. So this next slide, this is the antithesis of your last slide, is the saddest slide I've ever put together because it took me about 3 minutes to find all of these headlines. These are all Canadian, these are all very recent. Some of them may be from your hometown. Be proud. Too many from New Brunswick. So, originally I had the title of the slide, Everybody's Mad at Your Shelter. Yeah, and I took it off because I didn't want you to be pissed off at me. But everybody's mad at your shelter, and they don't know why. And so what I will not do today is vilify community members or neighbors of shelters to say they're wrong. I think what's wrong is we don't talk together. And so traditionally, what happens, when a new shelter is being built or it's being expanded or moved, we end up doing exactly this. And I've gone to so many of these meetings talking about there's a new shelter coming to your neighborhood. Let's talk about it. And it's this. It's a whole bunch of you and a few of us up here, and none of you are listening to us because all you're waiting for is your turn on the mic to yell at us. It doesn't work. It's really loud. It may feel good in the moment, but it doesn't move anything forward. So what a ongoing community liaison committee may do better is take the microphone away from folks and put them at the same table. So the purpose of a CLC, if in the context of a shelter, it is not to be an additional board for that shelter. It is to help find ways for that shelter or service provider to better integrate into the neighbor and the community. And in reality, I love shelter workers. I love shelters. I'll admit they're not all perfect, but they're all trying incredibly hard. What community members don't see ever is what happens behind the walls of shelter. What they see is what happens outside in their community. And what shelter workers rarely see is that. And so if we can just find a way to bring people together and talk about those two realities in a very different way, and not assume we're going to fix everything in 1 2-hour meeting, we may get to a better place of better understanding and two-way communication. And so there's a structure. I'll get into that in a little bit. The focus is on how do we create solutions together, not how are you as the shelter going to do all of this for us. This is shocking information, but homelessness is a community issue. It requires a community solution. Shelters are not part of the problem. They are just the most visible people trying to help solve it. So many. You're awesome. It's the Blue Jays. It's not us. So shared problem solving.
Dodger fan right here.
Oh my gosh. Can I get a hand for the Blue Jays? I don't even like baseball. I just like that Canada might beat America. So to me here, again, it's that two-way understanding and a little bit more transparency and honesty. The key, and so I'm just going to move into this. When do you start a CLC? Most likely when you're starting a new shelter, or when you're expanding, or when you're being forced to move, or all kinds of other things. And you have a whole bunch of people with very sharp pitchforks in your community who say, I love the work that you're doing. I just don't think this is the right spot. There is no perfect spot, but there are spots, and we need to start and we need to do this. So if we're going to do it, let's build a table with the right people. And the right people, so if we think of any community, businesses are impacted by the experience of homelessness. Let's not pretend that's not true. So let's make sure there's a business representative at that table. Let's make sure there's shelter leadership at that table. Let's make sure there are direct neighbors and community members who live in very close proximity to that location at that table. And let's also make sure that they are not just the champions of the shelter that are at that table. This is not a preaching to the choir club. This is a gathering of people who want to see something better, but just that may not be the language they're using yet. Obviously, we are not going to do this well. We could try to do it. It wouldn't work without lived experts and people with lived experience. In my experience, what I've found, and this is dumb, but most people who are most upset about homelessness in their community have never spoken or met somebody who's actually experiencing homelessness. They're afraid. That may even be valid, but they don't know why. And so I've seen it happen more times than I can count where somebody's sitting next to somebody who has lived experience, and afterwards they go, oh, you're so well spoken, or oh, I wouldn't have guessed. And you're like, oh, maybe we're all just the same. Yeah. So folks like community safety, whatever that may look like, faith-based organizations and other community partners, these are the people we want around the table, and we want that table to exist probably for at least a year. So this is an ongoing committee that meets with a shared agenda. It does work best if you can have a neutral way to start it, because there is recruitment. You do have to figure out who's going to be a part of it, and it has to start. But then what makes it work is that committee, those members, they then own it. So you back away. They set the focus. And again, it's not to tell the shelter what to do. It's to listen to each other and figure out what can we do differently to ensure that outside of the walls of your shelter, you are a better fit for our community. And I think most importantly, that members of that committee have networks, right? Everybody has their own networks that they can talk to. If they can hear real information about what's really happening in the shelter, and even weirdly hear success stories, the way they talk about shelter and the experience of homelessness to their networks can change. It will not change overnight, but we need to get actual, real information I'm very close too, into the hands of people who are doing very loud talking in the community. So, CLC is not magic. It will not fix anything overnight, but it is a far better process than thinking we're going to change hearts and minds in community by giving one-way information and just having it be set up that when there's a complaint, you complain to us and it's our job to fix it. Let's sit around the same table, talk about what's not working, be honest that some things are working, and figure out, just by ignoring or saying a shelter shouldn't exist here does not make homelessness go away. It makes it worse. So I'm going to retitle this whole thing to "If you've got time to whine, you've got time to shine." Yeah. And that's my presentation in 11 minutes. And for anybody that knows me, that is actually a miracle. Yeah.
Technology.
I have no idea.
I'll help. We're collaborating. See, that's co-creating right here.
By the way, there are seats up here, but I might make you do some jumping jacks. Just saying. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Oh boy. My name is Chris Freed. I am one half of a group called Leap Forward, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our story. And if you want to talk about diversity, our slide deck is incredibly very different. Yay. Here you go. Who we are. So I don't get Sean here today because we thought our presentation would be at a different day and time, and he's on a flight right now to Portugal. So he left about an hour ago. So you just get my story, and then I'm going to do my very, very best to give you 10 seconds of Sean's. All right. So who we are. My name, again, is Chris. I am a person with lived experience. If you would have met me 27 years ago, you would never have thought that I would be standing up here today. Because if there was ever a candidate qualified to be in PSH, I was it. When I started in this field 27 years ago, I was 6 months removed from my second term in prison. I had spent my better years of 15 through 25 living on the street, in and out of incarceration, on drugs, name it. I was it. But I also want to go a little bit prior to that and give you a little bit more of my history. I come from extreme privilege, not just because I'm a person that is white, but because my family also had a lot of money. How many of you have ever heard of the movie, I know I'm in Canada, but I'm going to guess you've heard of the movie Singing in the Rain? Yeah, it's also for old people. Young people are looking around saying, what in the hell is she talking about? Singing in the Rain, my great uncle was the producer of that movie. And so my entire family was in the entertainment industry. And so I grew up anybody here of Malibu, California? So I grew up in the hills of Malibu. And also, so one of the things about money is that it gives you access to things. And it gave me a lot of access to things because my parents weren't home very much. And so I did what I wanted to do. And then when they decided that I needed to be parented, I was like, I'm out. And so I thought I knew the best. So as I stated, I spent a lot of years on the street doing a lot of really crazy things. And then I started in this field. And my first day on the job in a shelter as a substance use counselor was probably one of the best days of my entire life. I loved the job. And when I say I loved the job, like I didn't want to go home. Like I would work 16 hours a day, getting paid for 8. And for those of you that remember back in the late 1990s, like $8 an hour, it was not great, but that's what I made, and I still showed up every day. So I loved the work. Fast forward, when I started in this work, I was invisible. I went to work every day wearing, big baggy clothes, and I wore jerseys and baseball caps backward. And I had this experience one time where one of my supervisors, not my direct supervisor, but the supervisor of the supervisor's supervisor, came into a room and sat with my supervisor with me sitting right next to him saying, I need you to tell Chris, and I don't even remember what it was. But I was like, I'm right here. But I was invisible to them. And I was determined from that point forward to not be invisible to anybody. But I also didn't want to be invited to the table because I had lived experience. I wanted to be invited to the table because I knew what I was talking about and because I had value to add. And I was only at the table because of that value, and I just so happen to have lived experience. And I think it's really important for people with lived experience to change the narrative that we are not at the table because we have lived experience, but we are at the table because we know what we were talking about and we can add value to your system. And I think that's really important. So one of the things that I think also is incredible is that I learned how to use my voice. And sometimes I was not respected or wanted to be at the table. But I continued to persist. And when I first started in this field, I didn't have an education. But my organization that I worked at, and I think it's really important to state this, when I started at this organization that I worked at for 23 years, there were 50 employees. Our annual budget was probably about $5 to $10 million a year, somewhere in that range, but we were also real estate developers. So we were building affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. When I left, we were 600 people. I was responsible for 500 of them and managing a budget of $69 million a year, which in some places are bigger, right? Our budget was bigger than, in some cases, many states. But I was trusted. that took time to build that trust. And I want to state that while my organization gave me the opportunity to go back to school and get an education, both an undergraduate and a graduate degree, none of those things mattered. I had common sense. And what I can tell you is no university in the world can buy you common sense, but it's the only thing at the time that allowed me to be included at the table. So I'm also going to lean on you all to say it is not about education. It is about common sense, because people can be trained around our systems of care if we just invest in them and find the time to coach and mentor people, and not just bring them into jobs and stick them at the bottom, but really bring people into jobs and allow them to learn, coach them, spend some time, not just in the job, but about what it takes to actually be successful in this work and be able to climb not only into organizational leadership. When I left the organization, I was a chief program officer, but also into system leadership. From there, I went on to become the executive systems person within our system of care, where I was helping them come up with the decisions and solutions around what we should as a system do, and then really moved into more of my full-time consulting work, which I do both on real interventions like encampment work, and as I talked about yesterday, for anybody who sat in that room, around creating innovative ideas that aren't necessarily all brand new, but put tweaks to them to make things better. And then the second part of our work, which is Leap Forward, and really I'm going to dive into some of that today. So Sean is not here, but the one thing, and I don't want to ruin his story in case any of you get an opportunity to meet him again, but the thing that I would say about Sean is he too is a person of lived experience that was able to climb from a line staff worker on outreach on the street to becoming the CEO of a very large national organization that was not only rooted in the United States, but went all over the country, focusing on things called 100-day challenges, in case you've ever encountered one of those. So what was really interesting is that Sean and I have been friends for 10 years. We've been in and out of conferences together. We're Facebook friends for young people. Facebook, it's the thing that's not Instagram or TikTok. But we have been friends for a number of years. And the one thing is that we did not know that each other had lived experience. It took us being invited to a horrible place called Hawaii, for those of you who might be known in Hawaii, to do a leadership conference where both of us learned during that time that we had lived experience. And I went up to him after he presented and said, hey, I've been thinking about this idea to create a lived experience advancement program for people to be able to go through that doesn't focus on the day-to-day of their job, but really focuses on what does it take to get people from line staff positions into executive, system, and national leadership. So we created Leap Forward, and these are the things that we focus on. We focus on building communities of practice where we have up to 24 people that are currently working in the sector with lived experience to come together to meet one another so that they can overcome things like imposter syndrome. And for those of you that might have lived experience in this room today, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Like what I have right now, that I've been invited to this conference outside of the United States to step up on a stage and talk to a bunch of folks. Like oftentimes I look around, I'm like, why am I here? I'm not really supposed to be here. Somebody else is supposed to be here. So we're really trying to build that network, the community, the relationship, and help get people exposed to other folks so that they can kind of come together and know when they show up at conferences, they're not alone. So communities of practice are one of the first things. We also do a leadership training that really focuses on working with people that are already in leaderships, boards, community, continuum of care boards, name it, whatever you have within your system of care, where we're training those folks how to engage people with lived experience to make their experience meaningful. And not just as like, we're inviting you again to the table because we have one spot on our organizational board that requires us to have somebody with lived experience, but because they have the expertise to actually lead your organizations forward and or to lead your systems forward. We do one-on-one professional coaching, and it's not just Sean and I that do the coaching, but we bring in other leaders from across our sector to be and to get the right fit coach for people so that they have not, again, this isn't about how to be a great housing navigator or shelter worker, but what does it take to show up at work? What does it take to climb into those leadership roles? What are the skills that you need to be able to do that, to successfully be able to climb in this work so that we do not keep you in the bottom rung or do not advance you simply because we need one manager on our team that has lived experience. We got to show the community that we care, but really to have the right people. Because if you invite the wrong people, simply trying to check a box, one, it's tokenism, and two, you might have the wrong person in that spot, right? Being a great caseworker does not make you a great manager, does not make you a great director, does not make you a great CEO. What makes you all of those things is having the experience that you need to be able to adequately fit the responsibilities of those jobs. So we work with them on that. And then we do some assessments and evaluations of communities to see where you're currently at and what are the things that you need to do to be able to advance, to be more inclusive with people of lived experience within the job sector. So here's our model. We cover 6 main key topics. And Sean does 3 and I do 3. And what you might hear is that I am the tactical and practical. Emotions, not my big thing. Sean is the emotional intelligent guy. So if you could pick out the 3 things that he's doing versus the 3 things that I'm doing, it would be great. But the first 2 are his. So leadership, finding your situational leadership style. What does it mean to be a leader in the homelessness and housing sector? The second thing that we focus on is leading with authenticity. So authentic collaboration, building authentic relationships, being an authentic leader, and creating the space for your team to be authentic. And really, what does that mean to show up at work? What does true collaborative partnership look like within your organization and with each other? Because one of the other things is that we know that as people start to climb into leadership, we don't want them to forget other people behind them that they also have a responsibility to help bring up. Then we move into management style. So this really walks through what is the difference between a line staff and a manager and a director and a C-suite and a system lead. It also looks at what does supervision mean? Because one of the things that I noticed throughout the States is that as we were going and deeper into our cohorts with folks, I asked them, how often do you meet with your supervisor? People with lived experience. They're like, I don't even know who my supervisor is. I'm like, oh, that's a problem. And or they'll say, oh yeah, we meet once a month for supervision, but oftentimes the meeting is canceled. I said, what do you talk about during supervision? Well, I don't know, like things. Like, no, supervision is meant to be structured. It's meant to be intentional. It's meant to provide direction. It's meant to provide clarity, but we do not do it. The first meeting, because we're all busy, right? Who in here is not busy? Who in here probably has 7,022 emails since you have been gone, and you are on your phone right now scrolling through them as I'm talking to you, right? We're all really, really busy, but you have to be incredibly intentional around supervision. Otherwise, people are lost. They don't know what they're supposed to do. Your responsibility as a manager is to bring people up. If we as executives, if we as directors or managers have to find when we get promoted up or when we're leaving the organization has to look outside for talent, you've missed the boat because you got a lot of talent inside if we just spent the time coaching and working with them. But what we tend to do is when we need to find more time, the meeting that gets canceled every single time is a supervision meeting. And those are the one meetings that should never be canceled if you want people to be really clear about where they need to go within the role. So I think that's really important. Okay, moving right along, supporting self and others. Once again, Sean, put on the glasses. How do you support your team, yourself, and your supervisor so that you have a thread throughout the commonality of your organization? It's not just about talking up or getting information from the top down, but it's about being able to make sure that the information is hitting the organization at all levels. How to recognize and support your genius and the genius of your team. Because here's the thing, I suck at process. You see how I did that? Process. I am not a process person. I am an innovator. I come up with an idea, and then I find people who are fantastic around me to help put together all of those pieces to make sure that the implementation is phenomenal and spot on, right? So we need to make sure, like, since I know that, then what I'm looking for are people that are really good at that thing to fill my gap. And that's what we're talking about in terms of supporting yourself and others. Just an example of that. All right. How to recognize and support. Finding your genius. Oh, I had a point to this. I'm sorry. The genius is if you suck at something, then don't try to be the perfect at something because that's what's going to hurt you. You just keep surrounding yourself by other people that are geniuses. And I have to tell you, people with lived experience are often geniuses in this space because they know how to do the thing that you come up with the idea of. And also they have a lot of really good ideas. So if you're not the innovator in the room, start cultivating those kinds of components within other people within your organization to be able to deliver that. And then how to use your authentic relationship building to support your coworkers, because that's incredibly important, is to keep people in this sector. And really what we're trying to do is to help people with lived experience climb so that they do not leave our sector, because their voice is important. But we know that we keep trying this over and over and over again. We keep bringing people into our system over and over and over again, and they fail. And they fail because we are not supporting them on the things that they need to be supported on. Things like casework and engaging with people. Like, this is something that Worko taught me a long time ago. I always find funny. Like, if you're picking up an assessment tool and you're like, hi, my name is Chris. Oh, hi, my name is Chris. What is your name? Like, people with lived experience know how to go up to Zach and say, hi, Zach, my name is Chris. Like, how are you doing today? Talk to me today. We don't need a manual to be able to engage with folks, right? We know how to inherently do that. So it's about finding those skills, and it's about ensuring that we are helping people elevate within those spaces. Okay, system of care, that's me. People cannot be invited to the table and invited to things like continuum of care boards and thrown on a board, and then they say things like, no, we're not going to take the federal money. Absolutely not. We do not like these rules. And oftentimes the rules suck, and we know that. But people are not educated around that because we have a box to check. We put them on a continuum of care board because we're required to do that. But then we don't give them the understanding of what a continuum of care board is. We have a responsibility, if we're going to invite people to the board, stop tokenizing them for being on the board, educate them so that they come informed and they can help you make good decisions around what policies we should be invoking, what direction our system should be going in. So it's really important that we spend the time to cultivate and invest in our folks. And then the last part is about thriving organizations. And one of the things that I say often are program people and finance people. How many people in this room are finance people? Oh, I got 2. Oh, I got 3. I got 4. Hey. Okay. Program people and finance people do not talk the same damn language. We're like confused all the time. So like in my own organization, the best example that I would have is that our finance team decided that they were only cutting checks twice a week. I was like, but we move people in every day. And they were like, well, they can wait to get a check. I'm like, that's not how landlords work, yo. Like, that's just not how it works. Like, I need a check every day. I need to be able to come to you if I need to be able to move someone in. And they're like, well, why can't they wait a week? I'm like, because there's like 20,000 other people applying for that same unit. Like, if they say yes, we got to jump. We need to be able to move. So it is about learning how to communicate, though, with other departments within your organization. You can't just go in and yell at them and call them idiots. Because when you do that, right? Oh, I forgot to give you the story, right? One of the very first things that I learned in this space, sorry, I usually give this story. Only 2 people in my life call me by my full name, which is Christine, my wife when she's pissed off at me. Yeah, we know those. And my former boss when I first started in this space. And one of the first lessons that he ever taught me was, Christine, you cannot show up at a meeting with your arms crossed and call people idiots. And I said, Jerome, I didn't call anybody an idiot. And you know what he said? You didn't have to. This shit said it all. Oh, yeah. All right. So it's really important that we learn how to talk to other people in a way that they can hear us. Because we might be have a really deep conviction about why we want to do or why we want them to do the thing that they don't want to do. And if we figure out the why, same thing that they're all talking about, if we find what our common why is, then we can get to a solution. So when we dive into thriving organizations, it's really about how do people with lived experience learn how to navigate their organization and to be an asset within their organization, a real value to the organization, and not someone who's just complaining but to complain, but truly coming to the table with solutions. So that's us in a nutshell. Right now, Sean and I formed this organization a year ago. It's been a year. Right now in the United States, we're in 7 different communities, and one of those communities, 2 of those communities is the entire state. And so our goal really is to start to develop these communities of practice and these cohorts and start bringing cohorts together from not only across the United States, but I'll be honest with you, across the world. So when they walk into spaces, they feel like they are part of the community. They feel like they have a voice that adds value. They feel like they belong, because imposter syndrome sucks, y'all. And to be the only person at the table just to click a box, we're missing the boat here. There's a lot of folks that can fill the open positions that we have in our organization that can truly stay in your organization that are just like me when I started. When I started, I fell in love day one. I never wanted to leave. Most people that I talk to with lived experience that are working in the sector love this sector. They just want the opportunity to be able to climb within their jobs, within their organizations, and within this sector so that they don't have to leave because they don't want to stay at the bottom either. Again, I'm going to remind you, 27 years ago, I was a candidate for permanent supportive housing. I don't even know if it existed 27 years ago because I didn't know about these systems. What I can promise you today is I belong at every conversation when we're talking about policies, when we're talking about procedures, when we're talking about building a system of care that is responsive, that works with a sense of urgency, and that focuses on bringing people indoors. Thank you for your time.
I'm gonna promote Chris's Chris's handouts here. So like before you leave, if like make sure you come get one of these.
Well, I don't have enough for
Well,
all y'all.
Before you leave, the fastest ones of you, make sure you get some of these. Yeah.
And also, we want to open it up. We have 20 minutes left for questions, so we want to be able to ask questions. Oh, hey!
That was the fastest one.
But we want to be able to. We wanted to make sure that we left time open for questions. I love running around, especially when it's or we have these microphones set up. But please come and ask us questions. Yeah.
Hi. This question, I guess, is more for Chris. So I'm the ED. Yeah, sorry.
There's two of us, so we
Christine.
are gonna co-answer.
Okay, both Chris's are
American Chris, Canadian Chris.
great.
Process.
So I'm the executive director at a women's center in Winnipeg. And most of my staff are women with lived and living experience. And it's truly like such a gift for me to be working with the organization. And where I struggle, because there is a specific situation, I guess, right now, with a frontline staff person who has demonstrated interest in advancing in the organization. And I think you touched a bit on this, Chris, just around like when you said you can't show up to a meeting with your arms crossed and telling people they're idiots. I would say she kind of leads sometimes with that energy. And
Just sometimes?
yeah. But she's fantastic. Yeah. And I struggle with like, is this a problem? Because I don't want to force her to abide by kind of a way, like to make her change who she is and how she is to fit within a box of what we see as professionalism. And so balancing this coaching, but without it, like, because honestly, I don't know if she'll ever get to that place where she develops fully in those skills, but I also want her to advance, and she wants that. And so I think part of it is incumbent upon me to figure out how I can support her and, you know, be clear and kind and provide the coaching, but balance without trying to make her fit within a box. So like how do you navigate those situations?
Yeah, so a couple of things that you touched on, because the first thing I was going to say is the workplace still requires a level of professionalism. And if people want to climb, professionalism is going to be key. And just because you have lived experience doesn't mean you get a pass. And I think oftentimes, right, we say, well, they're a person with lived experience, so we're just going to give them a pass. No, that is a real coaching moment to pull them in and say, you cannot show up like this. Like, we don't want you to have to conform. And this might be the wrong terminology, but I'm going to use it here because I'm in Canada and I just saw my good friend Michelle walk into the back of the room, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We can't say that anywhere in the United States right now. That doesn't mean, right, providing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm going to touch on the inclusion part, doesn't mean that we can allow people to still just show up and be disrespectful, take over a space and lead the space in a very different direction. but we need to pull people in and engage in the conversations with them about what it looks like and what does professionalism mean in the workplace, and not necessarily to conform. And I'm going to be really clear about this, to the white standard that we have as community set, but being your authentic self with professionalism is still doable, right? And it was that same message that Jerome gave me. Christine, you cannot show up this way. If you want people to listen to you, you cannot yell at them. As soon as you raise your voice, people go, "Eh." And how many parents do I have in the room? I have a 7 and 9-year-old who never, ever listened to me, ever. And when I yell at them, they still don't listen to me. And when they yell at me, I don't listen to them. So we have to get to this is just human nature of ensuring that we're engaging in the conversation with them, to be real and to be honest about what's expected in the workplace if they want the ability to advance. And they could be the best, most creative, biggest asset to your organization on one hand, and create such tension and negativity on the other hand, that we oftentimes, because of the tension and negativity, we let them go because we're afraid to engage in the conversation. You cannot be afraid to engage in the conversation just because they have lived experience. There's still an organizational requirement about how you show up. And so I think it's honesty. I don't know if you want to add.
I'm not going to follow that.
I can run. I think because we're on camera. You are being recorded.
So I am in a transitional housing organization, and we are inviting our residents. We have a resident advisory committee now, so one resident from each house comes together to help plan things. I'd like to foster more of that and find ways to give them additional training, because we have a couple guys who are saying, I want to get in this field. And how can I best, or how can everybody best foster that and bring them up so that, not only are they going to be alumni of our organization, they can give back now and then potentially get into it as a job.
Want to answer?
Yeah, well, I think just like Chris said, one of the things that we need to do a little bit better is find out, I love the question, what strength do you have? What are you bringing? Dive into that piece and build roles around that. And again, it's not the title that matters, it's what you bring to the table. And so whatever it is, it has to be genuine and used. Just creating groups so that we feel good that we've created the group is not enough. Yeah. So find out what they're really good at, what they want to do, why they want to enter this field, which makes no sense to me. But figure out that spark and foster that, as opposed to even just the group itself is not nearly as important as that person's why.
I agree.
Well, I'm just thinking a little bit about the experience that we've had, because I've been in that position of trying to find that why and supporting, and I talked a lot about emergence. And so working with our lived experience experts in our region, we've had lots of this emerge. We're just embarking on a journey right now looking at developing a social enterprise for our lived experienced leaders to be able to self-sustain and be part of the process. And we're leading it with our lived experience leaderships, and it's a bit of trust and mentorship and following energy that I talked about. And so it's, for me, just kind of being open to what's possible. And one thing that I found along the way is I didn't realize, even though I care so much, I'll be vulnerable here and say that I realized that I had some unconscious bias of expectations that is I was expecting a certain level of whatever it was. And when it didn't reach that, I was like, oh, wait a minute here. I had to reset my expectations. I was like, wait a minute, why did I even have a bar in the first place? We didn't even need one. And so that was just that matching and supporting and just always trying to be encouraging along the way. And the big thing that never really came up is that is overcoming the barriers. And so for that lived experience participation. And so for us, it's always find a way to compensate and recognize people for their time and what that looks like. And that can have some challenges too. But I just think about that, like if folks are participating, how are we acknowledging that and supporting that so that we can build capacity along the way?
One of the things that you just said in terms of compensation that I just wanted to touch on, when we created Leap Forward, many of the communities that we work with wanted to create stipends for the folks that were going through Leap Forward as a way to engage them to go. And our stance was no. What they're getting from they're already working. What they're getting from this is professional development, which every single person in this room, if you've never had the opportunity to receive professional development, like that is value add right there. I've been lucky enough a couple of times in my career to get executive coaching. Like it's a form of therapy, quite honestly. And so we were really clear with our communities. If you're going to require a stipend, we can't make you not do that. But we're going to strongly encourage you to think of this as professional development, and because they're already working in the sector. So when they're not working in the sector, I think, valuing people's time is really important. I think when they are in the sector, this is an investment in you and your organizations and or your community, right? In most of our places, we're not doing this at an organizational level. We're doing this mostly at a system level. The system has invested in you, and take this opportunity and use it to your advantage. Make the most of it. And so we've said no to stipends as much as we possibly can. But I think if you're asking people just to show up for their opinion, valuing their time, I think is really important. Other questions? We still have 15 minutes. I'm gonna make you all stay.
I'm going to loop back to the CLC conversation. And I mean, what you said, Chris, really spoke to me just in terms of, shelter workers, but almost also the homeless sector. And I think that this is particularly poignant for Ontario, maybe Alberta as well, maybe other provinces that I don't know, but harm reduction services as well, really getting a ton of community heat for outwardly facing homelessness. And I find town halls, but even community liaison committees become this open space for people to vent their systemic frustrations and lay blame on shelter workers, but lay blame on organizations for the pressures of mounting homelessness and lack of services and lack of recovery-oriented services, et cetera. And I'm wondering if you have any insights in terms of how to turn those conversations around when you're talking about a particular service and then people are using that opportunity to express their frustrations with what people are doing in the alleyway or in their front yards or whatever. And you're like, that's a separate issue than this service. But we're seeing people now, we're seeing services close because people are advocating to the Ontario government. We've seen a lot of supervised consumption services close, generally due to unrelated issues. But yeah, the visible is getting the pressure. I'm just wondering, do you have any insights on how to turn those conversations around in these meetings?
No. So unrelated issues, but like related because people don't really understand the scope and scale of what services are supposed to do. So one, like I know we don't use harm reduction anymore in our work. We say wellness promotion. And I think that's a great phrase, but it also makes me mad that we have to change language to do the same thing just so that people will stop being mad about us trying to help. So if we think of like that attitude at a CLC or a town hall, often it comes from, again, like people not knowing the true role of what a shelter is and should be doing. A shelter is not everything for a community, but it's perceived to be that way. So that's where I see the experience of homelessness congregate. I assume that's where it all has to happen and be solved. Shelter can be a beautiful housing-focused shelter, but it will not solve homelessness for your community. So I think just having that ongoing conversation that like we are doing the absolute best that we can and we don't have nearly enough to do it and we're just one part of this. And if we really as a community want to see this solved, we need more not less services. So again, it's not a magic fix. I just don't know a better way right now to talk to people who are almost refusing to listen until we can build a little bit of trust and a little bit of a relationship and come back time and time again and get to a place where like we may actually hear each other 6 months from now, where right now I know you just like, if it's this, you just need to yell at me, and that may feel good, but it's not going to move anything forward. And so again, like there's no perfect answer to any of this. I just know that a good relationship has never made anything worse.
What you just spoke to is exactly what we experience in our region as well. And so I just want to share kind of the observations and some of the reflections that we had to help support that. Like, Chris, you nailed it on the head. Like, it's the relationships piece. So that's like even the open invitations for these annual events that we had. We had folks that were super outspoken against shelters showing up. And because it was participatory and relationship focused, and you're sitting at tables with various people, folks might have tried to instigate and raise a little bit of some challenging perspectives. But because we created a structure that was participatory and allowed people to connect, it quickly, it simmered down. And so I think that the CLCs are a great method to do that. And I think it can go beyond that as well. Like, just yesterday at our community shelter, we had some students who held a barbecue outside the shelter, invited everyone to show up and just try to get a chance to interact between the community, come visit the shelter, come visit and meet some folks and hear some stories. Like, it's those little things that even if it's not the one really out, there's going to be the one or two people that you're never going to change. But if you can find those that, were maybe influenced by them, that can change the other way and be like, oh, hey, my perspective's different, and it'll slowly snowball. Again, it's not perfect, but finding ways to build relationships.
I was just, go ahead.
I'm just looking around the room and making sure this is safe to say. I'm not delusional, usually. The reality is that these days, and looking at you, Ontario, not just Ontario, but the reality is the loudest neighbors and community members these days may be your elected officials and have a very big microphone. And so, let's not pretend this is just sweet little old neighbors who are afraid and complaining on Facebook. This is people with big platforms and big power. And so, we don't have that. What we do have is the ability to pull folks together who can vote for new leaders.
That's really important. Yeah. I'll bring that microphone back there. The only thing that I was going to add to that, and this is something that I also learned from Ian, one of the communities I work in under my other firm, Impact, I had the pleasure of pulling a bunch of people together from one of our rural communities in Los Angeles. And for many people, when you think of Los Angeles, you don't think of rural, but we do have to the very, 45 minutes north of downtown is a very, very rural community. And one of the things I engaged with Ian as I started to try to pull this community together to get to their why so that they were working together was, do not invite the loudest, most obnoxious person that is going to naysay everything that you do to those meetings. Let them be the laggards. Not the early adopters, right? The early adopters are the ones that you kind of want around because they can start to make an influence. The laggards later will come along when they see things are working, and then they're going to take all the credit and say it's their idea. Let them have it. Yeah. I'll come to you next.
I'll just kind of be quick. It's more of a plug, I guess. Through the kind of a common thread through the different conferences I attended or this week is that we need to have those difficult conversations, right? And oftentimes we shy away from them because we might not feel comfortable or confident in having them, effectively. So here's my plug. I think motivational interviewing is kind of where you would find all of those answers. It's kind of a science-based, proven process to how to hold those difficult conversations. So it's kind of like the next step. It's like, yeah, I'm ready. I want to try and experiment and like have those, but how, right? So maybe that's the missing piece or the next kind of piece. But there is guidance around how to hold them and feeling more comfortable around that. So.
I agree. I'm also not surprised that a fellow New Brunswicker with a nice beard has a beautiful thing to say. So it's true. I think there's absolute beauty in being able to ask somebody a question that you genuinely want to hear their answer and then wait and listen for their answer. And we don't do that well.
So my question is for Canadian Chris. The Blue Jays, Chris. Yes. So you just mentioned elected officials, and when you were showing that slide with all of the different groups that are represented on your CLCs, I don't think I saw elected officials there. So I'm curious, how do you engage with those elected officials? Are they invited to join a seat at the table? Do you engage with them in a different way?
So one, like, again, I would never vilify elected officials. I think anybody that steps into that job is just as a sucker for punishment as the rest of us stepping into these jobs. I think the key with something like that is power. So power dynamics matter incredibly around a table. If you can balance and manage that well and have somebody in an elected position sit at the table as an equal member, then I think there's beauty in that. But if it becomes a power imbalance, then it just is a tokenistic group that's meant or will inevitably end up pushing somebody else's agenda. So I think if we can, anybody that we can have that has influence and can sit at a table looking for shared solutions, I think that's wonderful. There's just going to have to be some really honest conversations around whether that's possible. Yeah, but I think I would approach it that way. Like, we would love to have you as part of this, but this is not your group. This is a group of community members of all equal standing who all bring something really important and has nothing to do with their title.
All right. Well, thank you very much to the three of you. I did not expect what I heard today with the three of you. Like, it was filled with wisdom and practical everything. So thank you so much for coming all the way to Canada to share your wisdom with us. And Kristen, I'll say to you, I had the same advice by someone who changed my life to say, be careful with your words. So it wasn't about how I entered a room and the way I was dressed. It was how I was using my words, because I could hurt someone else without even realizing, because I was talking for justice. So that advice was so transformational. It changed my life. So I went from working with an accounting firm to now being a poet, I guess. So that really changed my life. And now what I find now is that I'm using poetry as a way to bring people to see something when I know they're coming from such different perspectives. I cannot address the topic with you, so let's use poetry for that. But that also now makes me look a bit cray-cray, because I used to be with the accounting firm. That was serious. I could be taken seriously with my words. But now it's almost like I need to justify that it's really serious. And I'm trying to bring together stakeholders that are so different. I'm not yet working, I would say, in the question of homelessness, but because of what I ended up doing around the neighborhood, that quickly became a fundamental piece of what I was trying to do. So I wonder if you have advice on how to make sure you keep working on those relationships that you know are important, but maybe they're not ready. But we're still going to be talking about homelessness at some point. And, we'll give you some time, but we'll keep nudging at you. It would be very, very helpful.
I would just say, like, I'm thinking about even the motivational interviewing comment. There is something beautiful about asking people what they want. Like, what matters to you? And I think it's an awesome thing to genuinely build relationships for the purpose of relationships so that they are established and foundational. And then when things emerge that you have to address together, you're not doing it just for that purpose. You're doing it because you have a caring, like, coordinated relationship, and that's already built. So do that. I would also say, like, from the other side of my brain, like, I love data. Like, that's my baby in this work. Can we have more poets in this work? Like, we don't speak the language of data nearly as beautifully as we should. And if we can find a way to communicate our story just a little bit better, I think that would be huge. Yeah.
Hi, George. I'm a person of lived and living experience and expertise, unpaid, 25 some years. So doing my own sort of research and analysis, and I want to commend you all for everything that you've done. But I just get a sense of the limitations of agencies, limitations of government, and go, it is really about the engagement and empowerment of the least. That's where the opportunity for evolutionary innovation is my sense. So some of your comments, I agree with, and some of it is like, hey, can you check your classism, casteism, purism? Because I get a sense of, well, if you're not able to connect with people, because I don't have an email, don't have a working computer. So how am I going to connect with your invitations when I'm almost unconnectable in the modern reality unless you can engage me and elevate me up to be a peer? So I guess what I'd like to ask you is how you are looking at engaging and empowering, those that are in the fringes, have great ideas, but are mixed knowledge and experience to contribute equitably.
Thank you for that question. I'll start and then just take a little time and then pass it on. We've reflected on that a lot. And so the way that I've been looking at it and trying to think about it to support that is that we have various levels of peer leadership. And so it's like various capacities. And so the folks that are really closely connected to the folks without email and ways of connecting, there's someone who does have access to email and communications, and it's also multiple modes of communicating. I will call folks, I will email those that need it, and then they know how to find the folks that need to be there who don't have an email. They know where they're hanging out or how to connect. I saw their reaction. Let's talk after, because I would love to learn more. But it's a challenge that we're working through. I don't have the right answers, but it's me trying to, problem solve. How do I work? And I have these goals of bringing folks with lived experience there, but how do I do that effectively within the systems and capacity and time that I have? And so that's why I've been working through the step level of, multiple folks to connect with.
Again, no perfect answer. I will say what I see work best is in-person meetings around a real table at a consistent time and place every month. And yes, we have to be extremely strategic on how we're doing recruitment and building that table. And if we're just doing it in a way that we know an entire population is being neglected, it's not good enough. So I think this is a progression. This is better than what we've done before. If we think we're done now, we're delusional. But I think COVID caused way more harm to our sector than we admit in the way that we do our work. Like, our work should not live online. Our work lives too much online, and we assume That's how other people operate. I like being face to face across the table with somebody and having a real conversation, even if it's not a positive conversation, and then coming back and doing it again. And I think if you can help us find ways to make sure the right people are at the right tables, awesome. But I just think tables and people at them are important.
Thank you all for coming.
And I think I can speak that we'll stay up for a few minutes if anyone else has questions. I also forgot to say I have some handouts of the action worksheet if anyone